Charles Zwolsman was born in 1955 in Beverwijk, the Netherlands. From an early age, he showed signs of rebellion and independence. He wasn't interested in a normal job or quiet life. As a young man, he started hustling on the streets, learning how the underground worked, how money moved, who controlled it, and how drugs could change everything. Charles grew up in a neighborhood where toughness mattered more than school grades. He dropped out early and began working odd jobs, but he always wanted more. By his late teens, he had already been involved in petty thefts and smuggling cigarettes. Those small crimes became his training ground for the bigger world of organized crime. In the 1970s, Charles started hanging out with men who were already knee-deep in crime: smugglers, traffickers, and underworld brokers. Some of these men had ties to Klaas Bruinsma, who would later become one of the most feared figures in the Dutch criminal world. Charles began learning the secrets of drug routes, money laundering, and how to stay invisible to police. By the early 1980s, Zwolsman had graduated from small-scale smuggling to organizing large drug shipments. He discovered that amphetamines, popularly called speed, could be made cheaply and sold for huge profits. He found chemists who knew how to cook it, and from there, his empire began to grow. Charles invested heavily in laboratories hidden across the Netherlands. These labs could produce tons of amphetamine a month. His network supplied drugs to Germany, Belgium, and the UK. It was said that at his peak, Charles controlled nearly 1/3 of all amphetamines moving through Northern Europe. Zwolsman was clever. He used shell companies, fake invoices, and innocent-looking warehouses to hide his operations. Whenever police came close, he simply moved his labs. The Dutch authorities called him untouchable for years because they couldn't gather enough evidence to convict him. Charles's relationship with Klaas Bruinsma was both business and survival. Bruinsma's organization provided protection and distribution networks for Zwolsman's drugs. They both benefited. Charles got muscle and reach. Bruinsma got a steady supply of product. Together, they shaped part of the modern Dutch drug underworld. By the late 1980s, Zwolsman's name was known not just in Amsterdam, but in Germany and the UK. His operations stretched into Spain and Scandinavia. He built alliances with other traffickers like Johan Verhoek, known as De Hakelaar, and was rumored to have contacts even in Colombia. Most of Zwolsman's amphetamine labs were built in quiet rural areas. Locals would never suspect anything, just an old barn or warehouse. Inside, chemists worked day and night to produce white powder that would later flood Europe's party scene. Charles was not just a criminal, he was also a businessman. He invested his millions in real estate, racing teams, and front companies. He even entered professional car racing to look legitimate, something that gave him fame in Dutch media as a sportsman. It seemed unbelievable. A man who appeared on racing tracks during the day but ran massive drug labs at night. The media called him the gentleman criminal. But behind that calm face was a man who trusted no one and always expected betrayal. The Dutch underworld was not peaceful. Competition was deadly. When Klaas Bruinsma was murdered in 1991, chaos erupted. Different gangs tried to take over his empire. Zwolsman tried to stay neutral, but his labs and connections made him a target for both rivals and police. Zwolsman built one of the most sophisticated smuggling networks in Europe. Trucks, ships, and even airplanes carried his drugs across borders. Customs officers were bribed, containers were mislabeled, and millions in cash flowed back into his system. By the mid-1990s, Dutch and German authorities had gathered enough information to move against him. They raided several warehouses, finding traces of amphetamines, precursor chemicals, and ledgers showing massive profits. Charles was arrested, but he had always prepared for that moment. When police finally caught him in 1994, it made national headlines. The Speed King was behind bars. But even then, Zwolsman acted calm. He hired top lawyers and denied everything, claiming he was a businessman, not a criminal. Charles's trials lasted for years. He faced charges of drug trafficking, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. But Dutch law was complex, and his legal team used every loophole to delay or dismiss evidence. Many witnesses refused to talk, afraid for their lives. Investigators believed that Zwolsman had hidden millions of guilders, Dutch currency before the euro, in offshore accounts. Despite all efforts, most of that money was never found. He was said to have buried some of it in cash across properties in Spain and the Netherlands. Several of Zwolsman's old associates began cooperating with police to save themselves. They told stories of huge drug labs, secret meetings with other traffickers like Etienne Urca, and deals with foreign crime syndicates. Their words painted Charles as a mastermind. Once his key chemists and transporters were caught, Zwolsman's empire collapsed. The production of speed dropped sharply in the Netherlands. The vacuum created gave rise to new groups, some linked to Moroccan Dutch gangs like Benaouf A and Noffel. Even after his first prison sentence, Zwolsman didn't give up. When he was released, he tried to rebuild parts of his old network. But the world had changed. New players like Gwinnett Martha and the Holleder brothers were taking over Amsterdam's streets. Dutch journalists followed his every move. He became a symbol of how rich a drug trafficker could become while still living inside the country. Interviews, documentaries, and books mentioned him as one of the smartest criminals of his time. Charles had a family, but his criminal lifestyle put constant strain on them. He tried to shield them from danger, but police raids and media attention made it impossible to hide. His children would later become involved in racing, continuing his public image as a sportsman. Zwolsman's investment in car racing wasn't just for show. It was also a way to clean money. He owned teams, sponsored events, and used the racing world as a cover for moving large amounts of cash without suspicion. Both Dutch and international agencies kept files on him. Europol considered Zwolsman's group one of the largest synthetic drug producers in Europe. His operations helped change the landscape of European organized crime forever. Like many crime bosses, Zwolsman suffered betrayal from his own men. Some began skimming profits. Others secretly worked with police. Charles grew paranoid, changing phones weekly and using coded messages to communicate. Even though he wasn't known for direct violence like Holleder or Gwinnett Martha, people feared Zwolsman because of his power and connections. He controlled production, and whoever wanted to sell drugs had to go through him. In 2006, Zwolsman was arrested again for money laundering and drug-related offenses. The police had evidence of 20 million euros unaccounted for. This time, prosecutors wanted to make sure he didn't walk free. He was convicted and sentenced to prison again. Though he denied the charges, the court described him as a man who built his wealth on illegal drug trade and corruption. In prison, Charles remained calm and disciplined. He read, exercised, and planned for the day he might regain freedom. But years of stress and tension began to affect his health. In December 2011, Charles Zwolsman was found dead in his prison cell. The cause was reported as natural, though many suspected foul play. Some believed he was silenced because he knew too much about old alliances between criminals and corrupt officials. When news of his death broke, many in the underworld were shocked. Even rivals respected him. Some called him the last of the old-school Dutch gangsters, men who built empires without constant bloodshed. After his death, investigators still searched for his missing millions. Properties, racing companies, and old accounts were traced, but large sums vanished forever. To this day, people whisper about Zwolsman's hidden treasure. After Zwolsman's fall, new players like Noffel F, Benaouf A, and Saeed Razouki filled the vacuum. But unlike Charles, their methods were brutal and bloody. The underworld became more violent after his era ended. Zwolsman's story shows how intelligence and greed can build empires, but also destroy them. He lived like a king, but died a prisoner, proving that no one truly escapes the law forever. Many believe that his empire could not have survived without help from corrupt police and customs officers. His ability to operate for so long shows how deep crime had infiltrated Dutch systems. Even years later, criminals studied how Zwolsman organized his network. His methods of distribution, money hiding, and business fronts became models for later traffickers. The Dutch government used his case to reform laws on synthetic drug production and money laundering. New agencies were created to monitor chemical sales and financial transactions more closely. Books, documentaries, and films have mentioned Zwolsman's name, portraying him as both a villain and a genius. He remains one of the most talked about figures in Dutch organized crime history. Behind the headlines, Charles was a complex man, intelligent, cold, calculating, and ambitious. He loved control, money, and the thrill of power, but those same things eventually destroyed him. When Charles Zwolsman died, an era ended. He represented a time when Dutch criminals were businessmen first and killers second. Today's underworld, filled with betrayal and blood, stands in sharp contrast to the empire he once built.